What is up, anglers? We're back. It's California fishing news for November 14th, 2019. I'm recording this at about 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, so it's cool. We can get some live updates today. Normally, I record it real early in the morning before the boats are fishing, but a little better timing today. It's going to be a quick one today. Not a ton new stuff to go over. A lot of the same from last week. But real quick, before we get into it, the trip I've been talking about that I'm going on, it is a 3.5 day on the Pacific Voyager. It leaves on the 21st, Thursday, a week from today. Coming back Monday morning at 6 a.m. It's $840 and there's spots available. So I'm not the charter master, but I told him I'd help him try to sell some spots. There's a few spots open. So it should be a really good trip. Fishing's still really good. We'll hear all about it now coming up. But if you have any interest, you can go to Belayed X on the Southern California Sport Boat Trip Planning. There's a thread about it. Or you can email me at californiafishingnews@gmail.com for more information. But yeah, Pacific Voyager, one of the best boats in the short range fleet. It's charter only. They don't run open parties. It's really hard to get on the boat unless you want to charter it for yourself. So it's a good opportunity to fish the boat. I've been on this trip the past 2 years. It's been really, really good both years, late November. So yeah, I gave you the info. Reach out if you're interested. Otherwise, let's get into it. Boom. So last week we talked about the close to shore stuff had kind of dried up for the full day boats, and then the boats are fishing a new area out west by like the East Butterfly Bank. Well, in the last week, the close to shore stuff rebounded heavily. The San Diego that tried to fish the Coronados a couple days last week, they're back offshore, and the full day boats have been hitting like really good scores: 200 fish, 150 fish. Some of they're flirting right with the U.S. Line of water. Some of this is happening in Mexican waters, some of it's happening in U.S. waters. But it's been really, really good. The stuff closer to shore is a little bit smaller, it sounds like. It's kind of 12 to 35 pound grade yellowfin and a lot of skipjack mixed in. Whereas the boats fishing farther out by the Butterfly Blank have that 20 to 50 pound yellowfin, not so many skipjack, and then that bluefin out there is the bigger stuff, anywhere from 80 up to 300. There were some really, really good scores out in that farther zone during the last week, but it has slowed down the past couple days. I think it was just a few days ago, a Thunderbird came in from a 2-day. They had 204 yellowfin, the bigger grade from the farther zone, a number of bluefin, a super cow, and they were breaking off yellowfin to the boat because the people had enough of them. The past couple of days, though, there's been some slower trips out there. The O95 was out there. They had like 18 bluefin and a handful of yellowfin. The Thunderbird's out there today. They called in this morning. They had one bluefin right at 80 pounds. So they've seen a lot of bluefin from 80 pounds on up. And then the yellowfin moved in too, and they had a handful of yellowfin on the boat. Still really good fishing for really good, great fish, but not insanely wide open as it has been. It could be temperatures, it could be moon phase. I mean, who knows why the fish decide to bite better one day than the next, but either way, there's still a really good shot out there, really good fish, but it just hasn't been as good today or yesterday. We can take a look at temp break here. If you're watching this on YouTube, this is the 8-day sea surface temperature composite, and this is a 3-day. There's definitely more holes in that cooler water, 64, 65, 65 and a half degree water. Generally speaking, 65 degree water is too cold for yellowfin. I mean, they usually are like a 67 to 70 plus when they really like to bite. But I mean, they've been biting in 65 degree water the last week. So I mean, no rhyme, no reason to them sometimes. But it does show as this water cools, they will not be here forever. I know at some point in October I said this could end any time. It's time to go. Now it's really, really time to go. If you want to get on some yellowfin fishing this year, I mean, they could bite until Christmas. It's happened in the past few years, but it's just way more likely that the good, really good biting fish slows down anytime now. Hopefully not till after next weekend, because that's when my trip is. But it is time to go if you want to get on this stuff. Water's cooling down a little bit, but we don't have any big storms forecasted still, and that's going to be the real thing that turns this off. If there's one, or even worse, 2 storms back to back, that can really roll the water and send all these fish south. Bluefin, on the other hand, they bite totally fine in 63 degree water, even cooler. They're a colder water fish, so they don't mind it as much. There's a good chance they stick around longer, but you never know with these yellowfin. Here we're looking at marine traffic. This is the farther out zone. It's about 60 miles from home. They moved from the East Butterfly Bank last week. Now they're fishing pretty much on the West Butterfly Bank, another 5-10 miles, a little bit north and west. And then there's the closer range of fish that's about 20-25 miles from Point Loma. Like I said, some private boaters have had some really, really good scores this week, all in that 20-25 mile zone. It's like a 226, 302, and then all the way up to like the 182. So it's right on the border. Some good fishing in U.S. waters, some good fishing in Mexican waters. There's also been good smaller scores, not party boat, but private boaters or 4-pack, 6-pack charters, more north. There's the Lexi, which is a 4-pack charter boat out of Dana. They had full U.S. limits, I think 2 days in a row, fishing U.S. waters. Where, I'm not exactly sure, but I mean somewhere north of the border. If they run fast, there's a chance they run from Dana all the way down to the 182, but it's more likely to me that those fish are somewhere more local to North County, San Diego, or Dana Point. There's also some really good yellow fishing right on Desperation Reef area this last week for private boaters. They said they got wide open bite. They were eating dead fish in the chum. So it sounds like you got a shot at tuna pretty much all over the bite right now. There was a report of a bluefin on the backside of Catalina caught. So, I mean, they are definitely spread out. But the sport boats are fishing the two main areas, the 20-25 miles out area, and then the 55-plus mile out area. The farther area sounds like it's really good. Like the Thunderbird, they put out the kite while getting full speed yellowfin fishing and hooked like 300-pounders on the kite. So normally you have to travel a little bit, and the bluefin and yellowfin aren't in the exact same zone, or like at least not the really big bluefin. But right now, it sounds like they're mixed in, or the areas that they're with are kind of buttoned up with each other. And a lot of these captains are saying, like, look, they're having enough yellowfin, and they go try to look, and as soon as they get on a school of bluefin, the yellowfin move back in and chase the bluefin off. So, I mean, tons and tons of fish around. Let's just hope the weather holds and keeps it all together. That's about it for the Southern California offshore scene. Keep it up, guys. Go out this weekend. Weather looks fine this weekend. We'll get to weather in a little bit, but you got a good shot. All the boats are running. Full-day boats are fishing really, really well right now, so go get them while you can. Moving on. Inshore. There was some reports of yellowtail along the coastline this week. Again, 65-degree water and kind of dirty, but one boat got a couple yellows, a 20-pounder, and then a smaller one. That was around the Point Loma area by the tanks in 120 feet of water. And then there's other reports of yellowtail around, but I didn't have very many specifics on it. But it sounds like you got a shot at yellowtail around the coasts. Really good bass fishing has been happening too around Dana Point, Long Beach area, a little bit farther north. But sounds like some guys have having like 50 fish, 100 fish days. Really good fishing for the calicos and sandbass mixed together there. Moving on to the islands. Catalina, the yellowtail bite that's been going strong for weeks now seems to have really started to slow down. Boats are not calling in double-digit yellowtail every day now. A lot of boats are blanking. Some boats even switched from fishing the island every day to fishing the coastal shoreline because it just wasn't worth making the run. So it was a nice run. I mean, there's a good chance that they rebound anytime, but it sounds like that consistent yellowtail bite has turned off at Catalina a little bit. There's the sport boat, the Endeavor, out of Ventura. I don't know what island they fish. They're fishing one of the Northern Channel Islands. It could be Santa Rosa. You know, I'm not even going to try to guess. I don't know where they're fishing exactly, but they did have a hit at one point for 9 white sea bass this week. I saw photos. They were not like 50-pounders. They looked like they were like, you know, the just legal 30, 35 inchers. But still, nice to see a little white sea bass showing. And they had a couple yellowtail a couple days too. So mainly really good rock fishing, like there is consistently up there and the weather allows, but a little bit of white sea bass in the count just for a little bit of excitement. As far as Clemente, one report of guys, they were Spiros, getting a bunch of yellowtail there. That's the only real news. Good chance yellowtails are still around the island, but no one's really fishing them. Same goes for the banks. I mean, Tanner and Cortez, there's a good chance that yellowtail are still sitting out there. There's a good chance the tuna are spread out on those banks as well, but you know, the sport boats fish when they know there's fish. As long as they're catching them there, they don't really go looking. So maybe if the fish scatter a little bit or they lose them, boats will go take another look out there. But there's a good chance there's fish out there. Last news about the islands is the squid boats have been working. Clemente, maybe even Catalina too, but definitely at Clemente, there's been squid boats sitting. I don't know how heavy it's floating, but there's been some live squid available at Nacho's. He's a bait provider in Huntington Bay, Dana, Long Beach Harbor somewhere, and then some squid boats at Catalina as well. So there's a squid starting to float. See if the fish switch and get on that. It's always fun bait to fish in the fall. Boom, that's it for inshore and islands. Talking about the surf, it's still kicking. Water temps are dropping there too, like everywhere else, slowly but surely. But there were still reports of at least some Corbina some barred surf perch, and then this kind of goes to the inshore too, but some halibut, both from the surf and from inshore. There's been some decent halibut caught. November's definitely a time of year where they catch some really nice halibut. Dana Wharf does their halibut derby where you pay like a little extra every trip, and then the winner gets cash prizes. You can look it up on their website. But there's been some good halibut caught. There's a halibut tournament this month in San Diego Bay. It's kind of like a relaxed, good time thing, but they always catch good halibut, and definitely a couple in the surf as well. There's been reports of lots of bait in the surf too. So there's lots of bait in the surf. If you go to your productive areas, there's a really, really good chance that there's fish on them. If you've never fished for halibut in the surf, you just got to pay your dues and go looking. I have a Lucky Craft flash minnow that I have cast the paint off of. Literally, I've cast this thing over 1,000 times, and I have caught 2 halibut on it. 1 legal, 1 short. I mean, I'm probably not fishing the most productive areas. Guys that get it dialed in do a lot better. But yeah, go pay your dues, get your time in. If the weather's nice, it's always good to go take a walk to the beach. Look on Google Maps or Google Earth for structure if you need to do some scouting. Go by reefs. You know, they like always say reef and sand. They're ambush predators. They lay in the sand right by the side of the structure, trying to ambush the bait. But yeah, if you've never done it, good chance to go target some halibut in the surf. Moving on, let's talk about swordfish. Not a ton to say about swordfish, except for there was a bunch more caught this week. Because bluefin have been kind of normal, they're calling 2019 the year of the sword, because it's been the first year for this daytime deep drop sword fishery to really bust open in Southern California. Bite Sport Fishing, Brandon Hayward and Wes run it. This is Wes's Instagram here. He got at least one this week, and they're running some open party trips. They said all their weekends are booked this year, but because of the high interest and willing fish, they're offering 2 midweek open party trips in December, exclusively targeting swordfish. They're limited to 3 people. They're $700 a person, and you can book them directly through the Fisherman's Landing website. I mean, I know $700 for a day trip sounds really expensive to me, because, I mean, my trip's 3.5, 40 basically for $800, and that's expensive to me. But, you know, there's people of all different levels of monetary wealth in fishing. There's guys with yachts, and then there's, you know, sustenance fishermen with no money. So for some people, it's easily worth the $700 to go get on a fish of a lifetime. Or if you know, someone who has a $50,000, $60,000 boat, then it can be worth the $700 just for the intel and the know-how to learn how to do it. So you can check them out, One Downer, Bite Sport Fishing, Brandon Hayward, or book through Fisherman's Landing. Otherwise, there's been a couple weighed in at Balboa Angling Club. You can follow them on Facebook, and you'll see. But there's, I mean, and at least one other one reported on Bloody Deck. So at least 4, and I'm sure that's just I mean, most of these aren't getting reported. So a bunch of swordfish caught this week. Pretty exciting. It'll be cool to see how this develops in years coming, because this is really the first year that it's bust open. I mean, guys caught 1 or 2 last year, maybe the year before. I remember the first report, it happened in Bloody Decks, and it was a huge deal. But this year, it's, you know, everybody's doing it. There's different areas. Some of the first were caught out by San Clemente Island. There's some caught off San Diego. You just need good electronics, and then you're metering down at like 900, 1,100 feet, looking for bait, looking for marks, and then you drop and you're patient, but you got a chance at sword. That's it for swordfish, guys, but the info's there if you want to put in the time. Next, lobster. Not a ton to say about lobster. I've heard some people saying lobster's slow. People who got it dialed say they still getting their limits. I just wanted to share a tip I found interesting, and take all this with a grain of salt. I do not have a ton of experience hoop netting for lobster, but what this guy said is he hates the moon for lobster fishing. He thinks more light in the water, the worse the crawl. But even if it's a full moon, sometimes you have a window. Like, let's say it's going to be a full moon, but it rises at 8:30. It's getting dark at 5:30. You can set your first pot at 5:30, and you have 3 hours of really good productive time there to get them. So just something to consider. Other people said that they crawl well during the full moon. You know, take it all with a grain of salt, but it's something just to keep in mind and give it a try. Some people like to go out late, you know, 11, 12 after they put kids to bed or whatever to hoop. But maybe if it's something like this, go out right before sunset, do a little fishing, drop your hoops before it gets dark, and try to get them before the moonrise. Speaking of moonrise, I want to talk about the moon phase a little bit. I know I've done this once before, and then I kind of fell out of the habit, because moon phase is one of those fickle things in fishing. People swear by it, and then as soon as you develop a belief about what you know works the moon phase, the fish just, you know, decide to do the complete opposite and put you in your place. But in my experience, the past couple seasons, the bluefin have bit really well around the new moons, particularly the few days leading right up to the new moon. I'm hoping that happens again because, like I said, the trip I'm fishing goes from the 21st to the 25th, and the complete new moon is on the 26th of this month. So we're on the 14th. The full moon was the 12th. Maybe these fish are slowing down a couple days after the full moon, and then they'll get right back with it in a week or so. We'll have to see. But just keep that in mind. If this is it could be another data point in, our vast logs we keep as fishermen to try to form some patterns and some opinions about how this works. There was a really good thread or post where someone asked all the long range captains about what they thought of moon phase. And this is long range guys who fish yellowfin down in Mexico. But by the end of it, the consensus basically was that there was no consensus about the moon phase. Go fishing when you can go fishing. Bluefin seemed to maybe react to the moon a little bit more particular, but you never really know. But it's something to keep an eye on. It's full 2 days ago. The quarter moon's on the 19th and the new moon on the 26th. All right, let's take a look at the weather now. The synopsis at 1 p.m. Yeah, that's technical stuff nobody really cares about. I was about to read. Basically, weak offshore flow will develop this weekend with weak to moderate onshore flow returning on Monday. Nothing too crazy. There's some 3 to 5, 3 to 6 foot swells, but it's generally spaced out at long intervals, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue, especially with the big boats. And then this is showing winds at 10 to 15 knots as the heaviest pretty much everywhere up until Tuesday night. So looks totally fine through the weekend. Maybe not great, perfect flat weather, but completely fishable, especially for the sport boats. This is another site I recently found. If you're watching this, it's from marineweather.gov. But they have different sections of the map you can click on to get a little bit more specific. And this is for basically Mexican border up to the north end of Clemente and offshore. So it's kind of like the same 30 to 60 miles offshore, including San Clemente Island zone. But it's just another site. Whenever you're looking at weather, it's good to look at all your sources you can, compare and contrast, and start to realize which ones you like, which ones you trust. All weather forecasts are notoriously inaccurate. While we're on the subject, someone else posted about, there's a big supposed to blow next week. Hope it doesn't shut it down. I hadn't seen anything about this, so I went looking. You always have to take long-range weather forecasts with a grain of salt. I used to obsess over the weather forecast in college because I was a snowboarder, and I was always looking at snow forecasts, and I was reading it every day. The same way I obsess about fishing now is how I used to obsess about the weather forecast for snowboarding. And you just can't get excited over stuff. They have the different models that predict this stuff. There's the European models, the North American model, the GFS, and then none of them ever agree, and they're just very inaccurate when you start talking out 7 days or even longer. So right now it does show next Wednesday, which is the 20th, some heavy winds were blowing, but nothing really too bad. There's a chance we get a little bit of scattered showers, a tiny bit of precip, but I personally, it doesn't look like anything that's going to roll the water yet to me. We'll have to watch how this develops because it does show a little bit of change, and we basically haven't having this high pressure sit over California. And what that does is whenever these storms come from the north, the high pressure just deflects it, shoots them off more north or shoots them off south. It does look like towards the end of the month, that high pressure is going to start breaking down, which will allow some storms to dive down through California. But as far as I can tell, it's going to be happening after next weekend. My trip should be totally fine. We're going to have to keep a look on it, though, after that, towards Thanksgiving. But that's all about weather. The short term looks totally good. And after that, you really just got to look on it 3-4 days out because it's just super inaccurate. If you start trying to make plans based on stuff that's too far out, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. Boom, really quick, we're going back to NorCal. This is going longer than I thought. But the Northern California sport boats are still just destroying the crab and the rockfish. Full limits, 300 crab, 300 rockfish, 250 crab, 250 rockfish. Pretty much everywhere down to Monterey is getting full limits of crab and full limits of rockfish. Monterey was the first area, or the farthest south, where they were starting to get not full limits this week. There were some boats where they had 15 anglers, they got 90 crab one day instead of the 150 they could get. But nothing really surprised here because the commercial season opens tomorrow. I'll be really interested to look at the counts over the next week after the commercial season opens because that's when it all's supposed to drop off heavily. But so far, been super, super good. Get on it this weekend if you can. Otherwise, this is my first year really following the Northern California counts, so we'll have to see how this goes. But it's been super, super good rock fishing and crab fishing up there. Lastly, let's talk about freshwater. Trout season, I know we've talked about. Tomorrow, the 15th, is the last day for a lot of the areas in the eastern Sierras. A lot of the lakes closed for the winter. But for the rest of the state that's not in the mountains, trout fishing is really just getting started. Santee Lakes in San Diego got their first stocks. A lot of the other San Diego lakes that are still getting stocked every year, they'll start getting their fish either this month or next month. It all depends on water. The water temperatures. They won't stock the trout until the temperatures are low enough to sustain them. But some of the Northern California lakes are getting their stocks already too. So it's a great time of year to go out with the kids, throw out some power bait, sit, play some cards, hang out. Trout fishing is a great way to introduce people to fishing. You can use really cheap gear, doesn't require much. Just look up basic trout stuff and go have a good time. The trout fishing should be good for the non-mountain part of the states throughout the winter, and this is just the start of it. Lastly, two more things to talk about. There was a report from Berryessa today. Starting this, I knew I'd get some hate if I was going to talk about largemouth bass fishing in Southern California too much because the lakes are already so highly pressured. So I'm just going to basically avoid it in Southern California. But Northern California is another story. They're bigger lakes and they can handle more pressure, and it's a different game up there. If you're a Southern California bass fisherman and you've never been up to fish Berryessa or Clear Lake or the Delta, you got to make it. It's really just next level bass fishing. The reservoirs put ours to shame in terms of size, types of different fish. It's like you can be drop shotting and end up with a 3-pound rainbow trout up at Shasta or Berryessa. It's really, really cool fishing. So there was a report on NorCal Fish Reports from Berryessa. He said his best 5 went about 16 pounds, fished anywhere from 7 to 30 feet, and he got them on an Alabama rig, a jig, and a spinnerbait. So that's interesting. Cool stuff. I love to fish up there. Berryessa is great. So yeah, if you ever get a chance to go up to Northern California, fish some largemouth, give it a shot. Lastly, I wanted to talk about real in Northern California, talking about the salmon run. There was an interesting post on NorCal Fish Report about basically the wait for rainfall. If you're trying to drift the Smith, the Chetco, or the Eel Rivers, like Humboldt, Del Norte counties, really, really Northern California, they haven't had pretty much a drop of precip since mid-October. And the salmon don't move up the rivers until they get more rain, which causes the river to rise, gives the salmon the water they need. So I guess that's probably been the holdup with a lot of the salmon runs up in Northern California. So maybe look for the end of next month, and you can see as the precip comes, that high pressure we're talking about dissolves, get some better rain, and we'll have a chance for those salmon to start running. Slightly off topic, but there is a documentary on Netflix called Artificial. It talks about salmon farming, what we've done to salmon and steelhead, and they feature the Klamath River in it a little bit, the California part. So it's an interesting watch. It's pretty political, and it just tells you their one side of the story, but I thought it was a little bit eye-opening. So yeah, if you're listening to this and you're interested, check it out. It's on YouTube. It's free. It's done by Patagonia, but it was a pretty good watch. Boom. That's it for this week, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for telling your friends about it. Subscribe. All that good stuff, and I'll be back next week. It'll be interesting to watch next week if this weather moves in, if this yellowfin stops biting, if the crab counts drop, and everything else. We're still in really good, exciting fishing stuff right now, but December, January, it'll slow down, especially January, the rockfish season closes. People fish to basically just start fishing sculpin, I think. So you got till the end of the year to really get on a lot of this stuff. Go get it while you can, while the weather's good. Tight lines, and yeah, I'll be back next week.